Welcome everyone to the first official episode of the Rubbish Talk podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Heather Beattie, and I'm here with my other host, Alasdair Meldrum. We're kicking things off with an interview with Alasdair for episode 1 for everyone to get a wee bit of insight into who he is, his business, and where his idea for the Rubbish Talk podcast came from. So we're going to do a bit of a interview style today, hear a bit about Alasdair, what he's got to say about the industry, about his career, his journey into waste management, and hopefully get a bit of an idea of how the podcast is going to go as we go forward with some new guests. So welcome, Alasdair, to your own podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. We were meant to be joined by Jane Bond today, but unfortunately she's a bit croaky and doesn't have much of a voice, so we thought we'd spare you of her trying to speak. So poor Heather's having to do all the hard work and ask the questions.
I think that's the easy job. We'll see how the questions go. I think you might change your mind by the end of it, who's got the easiest job today. So I suppose, Alasdair, we'll kind of ask you a wee bit about your journey, but you can kick off however you want to describe yourself and who you are and what you do. Let everyone know.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think part of the idea with these podcasts is to try and get some background about the people that are involved in the waste and resource management sector. So I suppose with that in mind, my journey goes back to I left school at 16 to go to University of Strathclyde. I was intending to stay on for my 6th year in Scotland, but I managed to get the grades I needed, and my mum at the time was, "Not, you're off to uni as soon as you can because you've got the results." So I went to do environmental health at University of Strathclyde. I was finished that in 1990. At the end of that, obviously, like most people, was looking for a job. And when you do environmental health, what you have to do is you have to go to your degree, and then you've got to do 52 weeks of it's a practical, and then that's you become chartered after that. Now, most people in my course used to do that practical every Easter holiday, summer holiday. They had jobs with the councils. I had more fun things to do. I used to teach windsurfing in the summer and teach skiing in the winter. So I failed miserably to go and do my practical work. So I was left in a situation where I had to get a job, a year's job as a trainee, effectively. So I was applying for jobs. I had 2 job offers at the time. I had one with, I think it was Mid-Lothian Council, I can't quite remember. It was one of the Lothian councils. And then by chance, I'd managed to get an interview with a company called Shanks and McEwen. And Shanks and McEwen were a big private waste company that ran mainly landfill sites across the UK. So as it turned out, after struggling for a few months to get a job, I ended up with 2 job offers. The first one, the council one, I think if I remember right, it was about £12,500 a year it was paying, and the Shanks and McEwen one was paying the priceless sum of £8,500 plus the use of a company van. So I was left with a bit of a dilemma. I went to see my lecturer, a guy called Colin Clark, who's now Dr. Colin Clark, at the university, and I said to him, what should I do? Which one should I take? And his view was very much that I should take the Shanks and McEwen one, because that opportunity would never come up again, or unlikely to come up again. So even with the less money, I did take the Shanks and McEwen one, and I did that role for pretty much 5 years and developed that role quite considerably. And from my point of view, it was an excellent foundation, because effectively what I was doing was looking after the environmental monitoring at a number of landfill sites across the UK. So I used to cover sites in Aberdeen, Central Belt of Scotland, and all the way down to Wales. So I used to get to see all the different sites, all the different problems we might have, all the various issues. So from a learning point of view, it was excellent, and it also suited me in the sense that it was quite an active role. So you used to go out, walk around the site, take surface water samples, sample the groundwater, check gas levels around the site, and so on. So there was the site work, but then you obviously had to write that up and interpret it. And then over the years that role progressed. I was doing site audits, environmental audits, compliance audits, and so on. And that was really the journey into waste management. From there, I probably got a little bit frustrated that there were no sort of opportunities to move on. I used to go to sites and see all the some of the issues that were there, and I used to think all the managers were idiots and didn't have a clue what they were doing. And then I got an opportunity to move to a company, Bar Environmental, that was setting up a waste management division, and I was the site manager effectively for that operation. And I very quickly realised that the site managers weren't really idiots. They just had so many different competing priorities, whether it was staffing issues, getting contractors to work, getting machinery fixed, all these different things. And really at the end of the day, quite often the actual operation, dealing with the customers is absolute priority. And then some of the other things, maybe like the environmental compliance, maybe fall down the list a little bit. And, they shouldn't, but that's the reality of a manager's role. So I worked for 5 years there, running 2 landfill sites, one down in Ayrshire and one up at Dumbarton. And at the time we were taking something like 500,000 tonnes of waste per annum. So it's a lot of vehicle movements. Never stops. It stops on Christmas Day, it stops on New Year Day, but the reality is that people continue to produce rubbish, so you've got to be able to accept it and deal with it. And at that time, that was before. That's gone back to 1995, and that was before there was any sort of recycling. And the whole sector's moved on quite a bit from there. And that probably leads you on to your next question. I'm cheating here a little bit. We say that Heather's very kindly let me see some of the questions, so I'm probably jumping ahead.
No, that's okay. There's actually quite a few things there I didn't even know myself. I was thinking, I've probably heard all of this before, but certainly not. So it's quite interesting. So I didn't actually know you had to do the 52 weeks work experience and things. So I mean, that's something you don't really consider, and that probably does pave the way for a lot of people who kind of finish their degree, and then it might be a case of whatever they can get in terms of the jobs that are available to get experience, and that often can lead people down a path. Obviously I'll go on to ask you, what was the journey, and did you intend to end up where you did, sort of thing. But I think with a lot of careers is also just as you said, you come out of university, you try and find a job, you feel as though that's the next thing, and before you know it, you're 5-10 years into something, you think, this is where I've ended up my career. You probably couldn't have written it, but it's interesting to know, and that you went from, I suppose with Shanks, you done your year and then continued to roll for another kind of 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Some roles are very focused on getting chartered status. So if you train to be an accountant, the focus is to become chartered. If you do engineering, the focus is to become chartered, and that's the sort of gateway after your degree, if you like. Whereas some sectors are much less focused on being chartered. So obviously I never actually did the environmental health. I've still not done the environment. It was interesting because I was actually asked to talk I talked this year at the REHIS conference up in Aberdeen, and I was sort of explaining the story that I was one of the environmental health ones that got away. I never actually managed to get myself chartered for environmental health. But I did obviously get myself chartered for the Institute of Waste Management, which is the equivalent for the waste sector, if you like. And I think it's really important if people are working in the sector that they look at where they can get themselves chartered, whether it's doing the qualifications, doing the CPD, whatever it is you need to do it, and just having that as a next step after the qualifications.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I suppose, as you said, that's where you ended up, and that's the journey that led you, I suppose, to Albion Environmental. So after your time at Bar, environmental? Would the next step be setting up Albion? Would that be right?
No, there's a wee gap in the middle there.
Oh, okay.
So there was a bit of a wrong turning in life, if you like.
Right.
So I was at Bar till September 2001, I think it was, and I decided I was leaving to join a small incineration company that was based at Irvine. So they had a clinical waste incinerator, and they had what I would call an animal rendering site where, it sounds a bit gruesome here, sorry for the listeners, where they would take, it was BSE cattle, so mad cow disease, so cattle infected with that, and they would incinerate them and destroy them as part of an infection control process. So it had two facilities. So I'd managed to talk myself into the fact that I was going from the sort of low-tech end of the sector, running landfill sites, to the sort of high-tech sector, which was the incineration side. The problem was the owner, or sorry, not the owner of the company, the ownership of the company was getting interested. It was four investors, effectively. Well, some of them used to fly up in their wee private planes to Prestwick Airport to visit the site and so on. But the actual manager, who was an extremely bright guy, was effectively a lunatic, and the place was not great at all. And I remember quite vividly driving home from my first day at work thinking, what on earth have I done?
Yeah.
At the time, my son was a year and a half old, probably, and I was the main revenue earner in the family, if you like. So there's a bit of pressure. But I'd been thinking about setting up myself in business for a while, doing sort of waste management consultancy and training, and that was really the push I needed.
Yeah.
So I pretty much decided that at that point I was going to set myself up from the 1st of January 2002. And what was actually quite interesting about that was I was able to actually use that period to do all the sort of faffy things you need to do when you set up business. You need to set up a bank account, you need to get an accountant, you need to do all these different things. And I was able to sort of do them. The company worked 24 hours a day, so I managed to convince the management I would do an afternoon, a back shift. I would do sort of lunchtime to evening, and it meant I could set up meetings for setting up Albion and the sort of mornings and so on. So when it came to the 1st of January, well, I don't think I started on the 1st of January. I think I waited till the 2nd of January, or the 3rd maybe.
The rest.
Yeah, but when it came to starting, I was able to sort of hit the ground running with none of that sort of admin stuff that often takes a while to set up. But it was definitely a long 4 months sitting there trying to make sure there were no disasters on the site that effectively would have affected my reputation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in lots of ways, looking back, it was quite a dangerous place to work, and unfortunately, it's no longer in business because it wasn't it wasn't a good environment at all.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, as you said, you hear it time and time again. What kind of made you start up your own business, or what made you take the plunge? I think some people think about it for years, and more often than not, people have the same story. They've taken a job, or something's happened that they've went, oh no, this isn't it for me, and it's kind of now or never. You think, I've got an idea, let's go for it. Sometimes if you're too comfortable, you think, oh well, I'm happy where I am. As you said, your young child, you start to think, well, an income's an income, but obviously 20 years down the line, Albion Environmental, where you've grown, you're successful, and you probably think that was what a move to make, and it doesn't matter if you made a mistake at the time. It probably felt like the worst choice in the world to take that new job, but it's worked out. So that's nice to hear, and I think it gives people that bit of confidence as well, because there's probably people out there in the same position at the moment, whether it's within the waste and resource management industry or anything really. They've maybe, especially since COVID, they've maybe realised, they've lost a job or taken a job, and now might be the time to just to take the plunge if they've got an idea. So that's really interesting to hear, and really positive as well.
One of the interesting things was there was a customer I had when I was a bar, quite a good customer. The company had moved. This incineration company was his competitor, effectively. So I think either after my first day or my second day, I had a phone message left on my house phone, and it was basically, whatever you do when you get in, phone me.
Oh, that's never a good sign, is it?
And oh dear. And he was quite a big guy, I wouldn't say an aggressive guy, but was sort of the sort of guy you wouldn't
If he
like
tells
to
you to
mess
phone
with.
him,
Sort
you
of
phone him. Yeah.
thing. So I was like hesitantly phoned him, and it was like his first opening line was, why did you not, what have you done? Why did you not tell me? And I basically said, if I told you, you would have talked me out of it. And he said, you're absolutely right. But one of the good things he told me, and that was probably the sort of catalyst, it was like, he said, view it as a stepping stone. View it as a stepping stone to move on, and that was probably what gave me the little bit of a push to go on. And it was actually one of his contacts that gave me a contact where I was actually able to get sort of 3 days work a week, which was excellent in terms of starting up. And again, another thing I learned with this particular customer, I was always worried about how things would work and all the rest in terms of finances, and I was wanting to set up a contract, and this farmer that runs a site had never signed a contract in his life. His view was always, if we shake our hands and we'll do the deal. But what he did say to me, he says, I'm not going to sign a contract, but if at the end of the month you bring your invoice in, I'll give you a check there and then.
Oh wow.
And that's literally what we did for sort of 2-3 years, where I was paid, and that helps the cash flow significantly. So
massively.
It makes a big difference, and things like that. I think the difference now is, going back 20 years, things that could happen and happen quite readily, whereas now I think we're more formal about things, and that these things don't quite happen as easily, maybe. With that type of people in the sector. So that was effectively how I started at Albion. So I think initially, I think when I started, I sort of remember almost looking over my shoulder and thinking, like, this can't be this easy. I've got customers, I've got revenue coming in. It's like, and everybody'd been telling me how hard it was, and I was like, well, I've got these customers and doing this and I'm doing that, and for certainly for the first few months, I was like, it can't be this easy. There must be a catch. There must be a catch. But it was very much about, if anybody is setting a business, it's very much about keeping your contact, keeping your network open, and as I call it, sowing the seeds, just talking to people and just finding what they're up to and thinking about and explaining what you're up to, and generally the work will come to you, especially if you're just one person, because you don't need a massive amount of work to keep one person going.
Yeah, that's true. So you started off 2002 on your own. How long did it take before you kind of expanded and brought anyone else on board to work alongside you?
I can't actually remember. I think it was a year and a bit. I did take a definite decision. At the time I was 32, so I did take a decision that I wasn't going to stay, if you like, self-employed, just myself. I took a decision I was going to take people on, but I wasn't going to, getting into lots of debt or borrow lots of money to do it. I was going to sort of try and grow organically. So I think it was probably about a year and a half after that I took somebody on, and then I think probably sort of 3 years in, we maybe had a team of sort of 4 or 5 people, and just gradually, a lot of the way we started out, and we still do this, is I use subcontractors quite a bit. So I would get people to do work, that in their area of expertise, and we still do that now to make sure we're managing the workload, because that's often the challenge. People say it's you go self-employed, so you're your own boss, but the reality is you're not your own boss. You've got like 20 customers who are all your boss, and all expect you to drop everything and help them out when they're struggling. So there is a lot about just sort of managing workload and expectations of clients as best you can.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about subcontractors. Obviously, we know that Albion still does that at the moment, and that's how you started. And I think is that maybe got a lot to do with the such a variety of work that is in the sector that you could potentially do as a consultancy. You could have the biggest team in the world, but there'll still be jobs that come up that you think I don't have the internal resource for that, because every job is different, as we've came to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Initially my vision for the company was that I actually tried not to call myself. So effectively we do consultancy and training for the waste management sector. That's what the organisation does. And I tried for a good few years not to call myself a consultant, because I thought we provided much more sort of practical, on the ground support for clients. But the reality is that's what people end up calling you. So you've just got to stick with it. So sorry, I've totally lost my thread here. What did you ask again? Sorry.
Yeah, so just about obviously how different each job is, and how like varied the industry is, and that obviously that's why you could have the biggest team in the world and not still have enough people to cover some types of jobs that come in.
Well, that's exactly. You've either got capacity issues in terms of time scales, so you need people to help, or you've got specific expertise. The likes of Craig Chandler, who still is a subconsultant for us, he started back in 2002. He was actually employed. He was employed by the company I used to work for, Shanks McLean at the time, and he used to do weekends and nights for us.
Right. Okay.
And the likes of him, he's got loads of expertise, really technical health and safety, really technical in terms of hazardous waste. And we still rely on him for that expertise. And then some of the big consultancies rely on us for our expertise when they're struggling. So, and that's from an Albion point of view, we're probably actually quite a big specialised waste management team in Scotland. Which what often happens with the big consultancies is they'll have maybe one or two people that specialise in waste management in Scotland, and when they try and price for a job, what they do is pull people up from the rest of the UK. Right. So we're probably actually although we're a relatively small company, we're probably one of the bigger teams that's actually based in Scotland.
Yeah, that's good. And I suppose now your team has grown to, is it 12? About 12 full-time permanent staff we have at the moment. I'm racking my brain there to think of everyone, picturing them sitting in their chairs at the office.
It's about 12, but the challenge is doing full-time equivalents, because everybody's on not everybody, but quite a lot of people are on various forms of flexible working, whether it's 3 days a week or 4 days a week or 4.5 days a week or whatever it is. So it's been sitting around the sort of 12, 14 people for the last few years. We're probably starting to expand just before COVID hit, and then COVID was fairly, as it was for many businesses, it's been fairly tough, and I think it's still been fairly tough this year. In terms of moving forward, there's still a lot of uncertainty out there, but we've got a good solid team at the moment. So long may that continue.
Yeah, I mean that definitely helps, and as you said, during uncertain times. So I suppose, well, we've kind of talked about it a wee bit, but my question was going to be, how did you mean to enter this industry or this type of role, or as we talked about, was it just a case of that's how your training, your experience you had to take when you finished university, and that led you down this path, or did you always have in the back of your mind, I'm really interested in the waste industry and resource management or anything, or was it one of those ones you think, oh, how did I end up here?
If I'm being totally honest, I was probably like most young people, where I'd put not very much thought into where I was going. And start looking back, and I think my view was I was going to do environmental health, and then I think for some reason my ambition at the time was, in the early years when I was at Shanks, was actually get a job with what they called the river purification boards. Okay. So before the Scottish Environment Protection Agency, Scotland was split into, I can't remember. I think there was a Clyde River Purification Board, a fourth, and I can't remember the one up north was called. And they got, so effectively the sort of waste environmental function got moved. It's just they looked after the rivers and the water quality, and then the waste management was looked after by the Environmental Health. And effectively, Scottish Environment Protection Agency was formed by joining these two together. And that was 1996, I think that happened. So at one point I was quite keen, and I did go for a few interviews and stuff for river purification board jobs, but I was never successful, so I ended up having to stay where I was.
Oh well, I mean, there's always something that leads you down the path, so whether it's a rejection or if it's a planned journey, I suppose it's good to know that it works out in the end. Well, I suppose, I mean, I would hope you would probably say the highlight or your favourite part would be setting up your own business and becoming successful. But before that, did you have any favourite role or something that you done you thought, oh, really enjoyed this, or even somewhere that, you know, gave you the amount of experience and confidence to help you get to where you are at the moment?
It was the teaching skiing. It was
Well,
a
I mean, you need
student
to be
job.
confident for that, yeah.
But
I think there's a lot to be said.
It wasn't actually the teaching skiing. It was the finishing the lesson and being able to go skiing myself was the highlight. No, I think in terms of the day, what's the day job now? You know, certainly the role at Shanks McEwen, the environmental monitoring role, was you know, really key. Because I got so much experience. I got so much experience seeing all these different sites, and it used to get to the stage where I'd turn up at the site, for example, Aberdeen, and the foreman would literally be standing waiting for me, and they would be like, "Come on, I've got a wee problem down here. You need to come and have a look at it." Yeah. And I was like, "No, I've got work to do. I've got work to do." And he was, "No, you need to come down and have a look at it." And I was, you know, at the time I was young. I was young, low 20s sort of thing. And I used to go down, and the way I used to deal with it, I used to turn around and say to him, "Well, what are you thinking? What are you thinking of doing?" And you would sort of question them as to what they were thinking. And they would come out 9 times out of 10, they'd thought through what they needed to do, but they were just needing this sort of reassurance they were doing the right thing. And you'd say to them, "But if you do that, that'll happen. What you know, how will that work? How will you be able to do that?" That type of thing. And I learned just from these conversations alone. I used to learn a lot about how you deal with things, and just that, you know, 9 times out of 10, the people on the ground have got so much more knowledge in their head than you realise, but they're often quite, I'm not saying scared to put it out there, but they're maybe a bit reluctant to put it out there.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I think that's kind of experience is second to none. Like, you don't learn more than being on the job and seeing it firsthand. And I suppose I think that's something that even I've noticed that you've kind of tried to instill in your leadership, and you know, bringing anyone on and into the firm, especially myself with, you know, not much background before I joined Albion, and you know, I noticed straight away you're kind of like, get stuck in there, come and see this, come and do that. And you're right, it's the only way to learn, because you could sit and read about it, talk to people about it, but until you saw it kind of with your own eyes and firsthand, then yeah, I think it's really hard to actually to learn about it and gain experience. So, and I think that's interesting that you said that was your kind of strength or something that gave you the confidence to go out on your own, because you've obviously carried that through to your own business, which is really good. So I suppose, well, I was going to say, what's your long-term vision for Albion? But you know, you're 20 years in now. You hit your 20th anniversary in 2022. As Albion at the moment, Albion Environmental, what you envisioned it to be way back in 2002 when you started? Did you have a plan? Did you one of those people that set out a 10-year plan, or did you just think, let's take the plunge, see how this goes?
I think it probably took till about 10 years before we actually put a plan together.
Well, the fact you made it to 10 without a plan is good in itself, to be honest.
I used to have a competitor that told me every time I met him, "Oh, it gets really tough after a year," and then after a year I'd be okay, and it'd be really tough after 2 years, and so it went on until eventually gave up saying that. No, I think very early I learned that you need to keep there was nothing worse than being really busy doing all the work, and then suddenly the work finishes and you're like, oh, what have I got next to do? And that probably gets worse and worse. The more staff you have, the harder that gets. So over the years, we have done various plans in terms of vision, but I think a lot of the key is, looking at what the customers need, building up that relationship with the customers, because that's then what drives the work. And I think probably one of the frustrations that I have with the company is we do have lots of opportunities. There's lots of different things we're trying to do, and there's a limit to how much time we can spend on all these different things, because we've still got to make sure the revenue's coming in, and that's probably partly why you got employed in the first place. And I'm sure we can have a wee podcast about your background in the KTP and Innovate UK and all that stuff at a later date. But that's we do have lots of opportunities. We've got lots of ideas, and probably, if anything, one of the biggest, I feel like, criticisms of us is we're probably not as good as we should be about sharing out what we do. And I think that whole idea of these podcasts, which the more I talk about them and the more sort of excited I get about them, is to allow us to share what we do as Albion. But it's also the waste management sector is very poor at, they're very good about talking about waste management issues within waste management circles, but we're very poor at getting that information out to the public. So I'm hoping that we can use these podcasts to try and get that information out there. What is good in terms of environmental practice, in terms of waste management, but at the same time, sort of showcase all the different careers that are there, because we as an Albion have been doing training and vocational qualifications for 20 years. We've got a huge amount of knowledge, but the actual sector is pretty poor at training and developing staff, and it's going to get worse. If you look at a council waste collection fleet, you'll find that most of the drivers and loaders are over 50. The 15 years time, or maybe not as long as 15 years time, we're going to have no loaders and drivers. We're going to have, and that's a service that's provided to every house in the country once a week. And that somehow, that's what people expect, and that service is going to continue. And it's not, maybe not quite as simple as lots of people think, or they maybe don't actually think about it. They maybe don't, all they care about is the bin's been emptied. There's a big operation that sits behind that.
Yeah, that's interesting. That kind of leads on to what I was maybe going to talk about next. Is, a lot of people might think you only work in the sector, or you've entered the sector because you were really, really passionate about, either the environment, or, you always had an issue with littering, or, something like a passion that's led you into this. Was that the case, or do you think, your opinions and habits have changed because of this? Like, do you think, well, I was interested, environmental science is what I wanted to study just because that was what I was good at, had an interest in, and now obviously as you've learned a lot more and spent time in the sector, you're really passionate about making a difference environmentally, about everything, about waste reduction, consumption, and everything like that. Do you think having your own business and working in the sector has changed your habits outside the workplace, or do you think you already had those good habits beforehand?
I think
not to put you on the spot there and out yourself, but it's interesting, because I think sometimes you think, oh, it's easy for them to say they know everything about it, but was that something that was already there, or do you think you've changed your habits because of the job you do in the sector you're in?
I think I think certainly I'm really conscious of waste and resource management. As a kid, sometimes I used to do courses for council, and it's, I used to talk about people buying loads of crap at Christmas. And then come January, they throw last year's crap out, or sometimes before Christmas, they clean out the house and throw out all the crap they bought last year, and then buy more crap. And that's not sustainable in the long term. But we're very much, I think sometimes if you if you discuss that with people, you're viewed as a sort of Scrooge, you're viewed as a a meanie, you're viewed as various things. But I think certainly in the last few years, the agenda with much more awareness, the climate change and resource use, and I think even just people being short of cash at the moment. There's much more sort of recognition of, do I actually really need to buy that new iPhone, or this iPhone, there's not that much different between the new one and the old one. Therefore, do I really need to buy that new one? So I think probably I'm sort of conscious of sort of the recycling side in the house, if you like, but I'm also very conscious of do you actually need to buy something new? Can you go and get it repaired? Can you go and get it fixed? The classic I've got, and I think you might be coming to this, is I do a fair bit of running, and if you enter a race, you get a T-shirt, and it's like I've got a drawer full of T-shirts. So it takes me flipping half the year to wear every T-shirt I've got in the drawer, and the reality is I wear the ones that get to the top of the drawer, and that's all. The ones at the bottom never get worn. So there's organisations like Trees Not Tees. So a lot of races now, when you sign up, you can, rather than get a T-shirt, they'll donate money so a tree gets planted in your behalf. And that works most of the time. But then if you do a big race, if you do a fancy race, a special race, you can do the London Marathon or whatever, then you maybe want that T-shirt. There's a reason for that. And I think that's, I think people are really focused on, if I recycle, then it's okay.
Yeah.
Whereas the reality is, we shouldn't be producing the waste in the first place. That's where the big environmental improvement is. The example, quite often if I do a training course, I'll purposely go in with a bottle of water that I bought out of the shop, or normally I'll be bought a water I filled out of the tap. It'll be water, an old bottle from the house. And what I say to them is, if every single person in the UK bought one less bottle, as in if they reused a bottle once, that's 60 million less bottles produced in the UK.
Yeah.
And when you look at that sort of scale, so it's all, everybody making a little bit of a difference makes a huge change. And that's, there's too much focus on the recycling rather than the not producing the waste in the first place. And if you do produce the waste in the first place, can you reuse it and get some additional value out of it before you discard it? But that's hard messages for government to get across and people to take on. But I think there's certainly a lot more awareness of it. And the same sort of principle applies to, travel. Can you walk to work? Can you cycle to work? Do you actually really need to use that car for the 5-minute drive when, it's actually in reality a 15-minute walk? And there needs to be a lot more awareness of that type of thing, I think, within the wider population.
Yeah, like everything you're saying there, they're things that anyone can do. Anyone can look at the bigger picture. You don't have to be working in the industry, have specialist knowledge, have a degree. Okay, you guys tackle the issues that are always going to be there, and how do we recycle better, and how do we dispose of things better, and have more environmentally friendly practices. But it's not as difficult as that for the general public. If as you said, if one small change makes a massive difference, and the first one definitely since the COVID pandemic as well, is reducing your travel, changing your methods of travel and your consumption. Like they're the two massive ones that can make huge differences, and anyone can do. As you said, buying one less bottle of water a day or a week, or taking the train, or anything really. I mean, we saw all over the news at the start of the COVID pandemic the differences, and because there was not really much air travel happening, or any travel really. People weren't even commuting in cars or buses or trains, and I think that was really interesting to see how that captured the whole world. But it was things as simple as that people could understand. So that is definitely the messaging we have to get out there. It's not a really difficult thing. You don't have to have specialist knowledge. It's the big things like that make the differences. So yeah, I suppose hopefully that's what we're trying to get out there. And while we're doing that, Albion and the rest of the sector are also trying to make the difficult and the big changes behind the scenes. So kind of moving on from that, I suppose you've already talked about your running, which if anyone knows Alasdair knows he's a bit of a ultra marathon crazy man, as we explain him. So I suppose that's your kind of main passion and hobby outside of work, and that leads on to what I was going to discuss is with something so prevalent in everyday life, no matter what you do, where you are, you're probably seeing a bit of waste on the ground that you think, why is that not there, or bins that people aren't using properly to recycle. So are you able to switch off like at all from work and thinking about the sector when you're reminded constantly when you're out and about, and especially I know you do have other hobbies that keep you very busy, but when you're out running, can you switch off? As you said, you've come back to work before and told us, oh, it was this lovely race or this run at the weekend and there was people's rubbish in the middle of the woods and I debated whether should I pick it up and carry it with me to the next bin. So I think I might have already answered your question, but how easy do you find it to kind of switch off, or if you do, how do you do it?
I think as a first stance to that one, a personal view is Scotland's approach to litter and the environment is just appalling. It's just an absolute disgrace that we accept it, the amount of litter that's out there. And I think when you actually start noticing it and you start, we worked with, or did a wee bit of help with a guy called Chris Johnson, who's based in Prestwig. And he decided, he used to go litter picking with his daughter around the local park. And he decided he was going to keep a track of the number of items. And he actually organised this, basically a Google page where people added in the number of items they picked up. And within some like 8 months, volunteers had picked over 1 million bits of litter in Ayrshire.
Wow.
And that's just scandalous that we accept that. And then the downside, the sort of follow on from that is you then get organisations thinking, we need to stop the litter getting into the river and into the sea and so on. But the reality is, if it wasn't put in the land, then it would never get into the sea.
Yeah.
And we need to just make it totally unacceptable that people litter effectively. And it does become frustrating. You do go for a run in the middle of no place and you see litter, and I will pick it up and carry it if I can possibly carry it. In terms of my sort of main hobby, if you like, is running, and as you say, it tends to be longer distance stupid races, as people would call them. Reality is, work-wise, I think when you run your own business, you never really stop thinking about it. You're always having to think about it. And I've actually often wondered about the sort of ideal job where you can literally just go into work, do your work, and then leave. And I think it's things like, I don't know, I might be talking out of turn here, but things like air traffic control, where you literally turn up, you do your shift, and then you pass on to somebody else, and you can walk away and not think about it. Whereas the business I'm in, you walk away, but you're still worried about doing the work for a customer. You're worried about getting a quote out. You're doing this, you're doing that. So there's always something in your mind that's you've not been able to switch off. So my thought with the running is when you're struggling to breathe because you're running hard, it's pretty hard to think about anything else about the other. So it soon provides you a leveler, but it also provides you a good time, to think things through, and you just get a bit of space and freedom to think things through. So it's a good. I think it's good. I think anybody that's in business should have a hobby of some description or some sort of thing. And I think that's challenging when people have young, they're busy work and they've got young family and all the rest. But I think it's really important that there's something there. And I'm a huge fan of the sort of park run mentality, where it's 9:30 in Scotland. It's 9:30 a Saturday morning. 5k, walk, jog, run, whatever you want to do. And I'm a huge fan of that type of thing. That I think if more people were doing that, they would definitely feel the benefits of it overall. But I think part of the thing we're going to do with this podcast is when we talk about various things, we're going to have some show notes where if there are interesting links or whatever, we'll put them on there. And if anybody is interested in running, you know, lots of miles like the West Highland Way or you know, the various different things, I'll put up I've got a little bit of a Google blog with some stories and stuff on that. If anybody is interested, we'll share that up in the course notes or the podcast notes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite obvious that you say to all of us, and it's probably something that it's really helped you over the years running your own business, is having something else. As you said, I think a lot of people, not even just running their own business, but you know, day-to-day life, people think, oh well, if I just spend another hour tonight, I'll finish that bit before tomorrow for work. Or, you know, it's having that hard stop. If you say, okay, well, I'm going to train tonight at 7 o'clock, so regardless of how my work day goes, come 6 o'clock or whatever it is, what time your day finishes, I've got something in the diary, I'm going, and the work will be there tomorrow, you pick it up. And obviously there's times where you can't do that if something goes wrong, especially if you're running your own business or there's deadlines come out of nowhere. But I think like you're really good at saying, well, that's what I do. I train 3 nights a week and a weekend, or I plan a run, and that's a really good way to have a bit of balance. And I think for everyone, I mean, that's what it's all about, being able to switch off and do a good job and try again tomorrow or whatever it is. It's nice to have. And obviously Scotland's not really got the weather, but we've certainly got the scenery, so it's good to get out and about. And I suppose anyone in the sector as well is probably quite used to being out in all weather and enjoying it. So yeah, it's good to know, and it's really interesting to hear like your stories from your races and being out and about. So I think that's a lot of people will be interested to hear that, as well as along with the Albion journey. And you are just quite a disciplined person, which is good. It goes a long way. But I'm sure people can share a bit more about that, and certainly put on your blog and any information you've got about some of the amazing challenges you've done. So that's good to know. So I suppose you know, the question is, what do you think's next for you or for Albion Environmental? You know, outside of work, but still kind of like sector related. Do you have any passion projects that, you know, or that you'll take on into the future that can allow you to feel like you're still making a difference, whether it's, you know, after you stop working, or if you start slowing down a bit in your career? Is there anything that you would, or even that you could recommend that people who maybe don't work in the sector but want to make a difference can get involved in?
Yeah, the one I always suggest, I do quite a bit of lecturing at University of Edinburgh and University of West of Scotland on waste management, and the one I always say to students is international waste management. To a certain extent in the UK, we're sort of tinkering at the edges. We're you know, we've got a fairly good structure. You know, it might not be perfect, but we've got a good structure where, you know, we sort of recycle about half the waste, and we've got infrastructure to do that. We either landfill or incinerate the other half, and we recover the energy from that. It's an overall, you know, it could be better, but overall, you know, we are pretty much managing what we produce. Whereas if you go to a large part of the developing world, they have literally no functional waste management system. And I spent back in sort of 2010, 2012, I spent time in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what you see there in terms of waste management is just shocking. And you hear about all the plastic in the ocean, and the plastic in the oceans is largely coming from countries where they don't have a functioning waste management system. And a lot of what we do in the UK or in the West focuses on the environmental benefit of waste management. Yeah. But ultimately, the reason we developed a waste management system in the UK was because we had the plague in London. And the plague in London was rooted in unsanitary conditions, rats, rodents, that then led to the plague. And that's when we started, that's when the sort of basis of, you know, public health and waste management started. And the focused, you know, primary focus of managing waste properly is public health and preventing illness rather than environmental issues. And if that approach, you know, if you go to any sort of developing country, they don't have, or quite often they don't have a functional waste management system. And that's, you know, if you're out there and you're young and you want to, you know, make a difference in the world, that's where, to me, that's where you can make a massive difference. Yeah. And there's lots of opportunities out there to do that.
And is that, I think, something you would revisit in the future? Would you go back out and do another similar trip, or even if it's not work related, just to see, to tag along with someone?
I eventually had to. I think I went to Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, about 5 times, and we also supported a 2-week visit by delegates to here. But eventually, it was costing me too much money. The politics of it became too complex. The reality of what was you got involved in taxation. They never had a proper taxation system.
Mm-hmm.
So, to get funding to manage waste, they needed to charge a tax, but then that became really political and so on. So it just became complicated. I would love to get involved. We looked at doing some work out in Kenya and various other places, but there's certainly, I think there's a lot of stuff, we could add as a company, and I think particularly with the remote working nowadays is there's a real opportunity to do stuff. So I think if you're asking, have I got an unfinished job? I think the unfinished job is to have some sort of success and sort of making a contribution to international waste management would be a big one. But the last few years it's been hard enough to get in a day job to keep going. So I've not had much focus on that.
But still something in the back of your mind, and I suppose even through your teaching and lecturing at UWS and Edinburgh, you'll if you don't do it yourself, you're hopefully passing that on to students who will do it, and that's still a bit of your legacy as well. So I suppose that means you've always got some sort of hand in and involvement in being able to pass on what you learned there and what's needed. Probably will inspire some people to do the same, hopefully. So I suppose kind of following on from that's a bit of a whirlwind of your last maybe 30 years of life. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing that you've managed to put it into 40 minutes or so, but I think we've covered quite a lot of interesting things, and I suppose something to kind of help us tie a bit together. Do you have any advice or words of wisdom to pass on to listeners, or if you wanted to share one interesting fact or habit that people could pick up to help contribute to managing and improving recycling, anything that if you were to meet someone completely no experience, not sure what to do, and that said to you, Alasdair, how can I make a difference, what can I do, what would you say to them?
And the biggest one and the easiest one, particularly for people in Scotland, is literally every household in Scotland, the council provides a food waste collection service. Currently, it's something like 22% of the population actually use that food waste collection service. So there's another 78% not using it. And that, the benefits of doing that, so basically you would segregate your waste into a caddy, you would generally get a weekly uplift. People say it's going to be yucky, say it's going to be horrible. The reality to me is putting food waste in a residual bin would be, I've been doing the food waste since it came out, probably 5, 6, 7 years now. If the council said to me I had to go back to putting in the bin, I'd be like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that because, the caddy's hygienic, it's handy, you're making stuff, you just tip it into the caddy, whatever. And the sort of benefits to the householder is, one, you see how much food waste you're throwing out. And we all know the cost of food at the moment. So you think, well, hang on a minute here. Why did I have to throw that loaf out because I've not used it? What, could I make it? Could I freeze it? Could I do different things? And you look at how you can sort of minimise your food waste. And we talk, when we do the waste compositional work we do as a company, we talk about what we call avoidable food waste and unavoidable food waste. So unavoidable thing is your skin off your onion or the ends of a pepper or thing like that. That's unavoidable, whereas avoidable is where you've just let somebody go out of date, or you've made too much, or you whatever, and the avoidable amount of food waste that's thrown out is massive, and I reckon, I can't remember the figures, but it's something like £300-400 a year people can save by managing their food better. So that's the benefit to the householder. From the council point of view, the collection's already been done. So they've already got a vehicle coming around these houses anyway, so there's no extra cost to them. But the disposal of food waste is maybe only like say 20, 30 pound a tonne, whereas the residual waste is something like 120, 130 pound a tonne. So it's much cheaper in terms of the disposal. The food waste itself goes to either an anaerobic digestion plant or a composting plant. So produces energy, produces compost that gets put back in the land. So there's huge environmental benefits there. And we're hopefully going to get some guests that we're going to talk a lot more about anaerobic digestion and compost and so on and future podcasts if people are interested. So there's a benefit to the householder in terms of saving cash. Your bin's much cleaner and tidier, and particularly nowadays when our residual bins maybe only getting lifted, every 3 weeks or 4 weeks. You don't really want food sitting in that bin. You want to use the sort of weekly collection. So if you're not doing your food waste, basically start doing it. If you want to contribute to an improvement in the environment, that's a massive one that people can do. That's really simple. You don't need to go vegetarian for a month or whatever. You just first do the easy step, do the low hanging fruit first, and start segregating out your food waste.
Absolutely. I think that's a good bit of advice. And as you said, it's not costing anyone anything. It's not a big challenge. The infrastructure's in place. So yeah, get on it if you're not. So I suppose we've kind of got two finisher questions that we're going to hope to ask all the guests that we have on. So one of them you might have just covered there, or you might have something different in mind. But I was going to ask, in the waste world, if you had a magic wand, what is one thing you'd love to see changed?
In Scotland, the magic wand would be that every household has the same colour of bins, the same waste types to put in these bins, and the same collection frequency. And I think if we managed to do that, that would make a huge difference across Scotland, because it is quite a nonsense that we have different collection, different frequencies, different waste types at 32 local authorities. 32, sorry, I don't know where 26 came from. 32 local authorities across Scotland, and it's something that could be, really simple. That would all, as well as giving certainty to householder, it would give a lot of certainty to the waste management companies that end up dealing with that waste, that they know that, that currently at the moment you've got maybe mixed recycling coming from one council that contains glass, but then you've got another council that doesn't contain glass, so they've got to set up their equipment to deal with the different material types and so on. So that's my magic wand wish. Whether we'll ever get there or not.
A great one, to be honest. And the way you say it, it sounds like we wouldn't even need a magic wand, but it is a lot harder than it sounds to do that. But I think that's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. So final question, I suppose. Might put you on the spot a wee bit here, so you could maybe pick something that you've already talked about if you want. But can you give us a bit of waste industry jargon and tell us what it means, if we're sharing a bit of knowledge here with people? Pick one of your faves.
I was actually struggling with this one. I was struggling with one, but the one that I suppose is probably most prominent, because it's probably, when I first started Albion, it was probably about a third of the workload that we did. So the one I'm going to use is a thing called WAMITAB. That if you're in the waste industry, everybody talks about doing their WAMITAB. And effectively, WAMITAB stands for Waste Management Industry Training and Advisory Board. And it was an entity set up. So back in, I think it's probably 96, the government thought that waste management facilities weren't very well run. So it said, how can we improve how they're run? We need to make it mandatory, the managers of these facilities, to do a qualification to be qualified to manage these facilities, and that's what they introduced. And the overarching body that sort of managed these qualifications was called WAMITAB. So now everybody talks about doing their WAMITAB, having their WAMITAB, and all the rest. Effectively, what sits behind that is vocational qualifications that you can do through SQA in Scotland, but that's the one that's been, probably the one that I've been involved in for the longest. And people outside the sector probably have no clue at all what what DAF is or what it means. So there you go. That was my.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's something I suppose everybody will probably came across at some point and heard it and thought, what on earth does that possibly mean? so now we know. We'll keep a wee note, and I'm sure we'll think of plenty more. There's a lot that even I have came across since working with Albion Environmental that I thought I couldn't even dream up what that could possibly stand for. So I'm sure we'll have a list. But well, I think that kind of takes us to the end of most of the topics we wanted to cover, Alasdair. And it was a really good insight into you, Albion Environmental, and obviously it was our first official episode of the Rubbish Talk podcast. So it was a good intro to you, and hopefully going forward now, it'll be up to yourself, me and Jane Bond, between the three of us, to interview and get some insight from a whole host of different people from across the sector. I know we've got a list already of some interesting people we want to hear from, and we hope the listeners want to hear from as well. So we'll get them lined up as soon as we can, hopefully. So for me, really, I just wanted to say thank you for giving us your time, giving us your story. And giving us the idea for the podcast. I think it's great, and it's everything you covered about education and getting the word out there. This is a great way to do it, and hopefully quite an enjoyable one as well. Get a wee bit of personal information, background, and some really interesting insights into the industry as well. So thanks very much.
Absolutely, thank you for being the star. You're obviously the star interviewer because we've got this is our first one. I think just for people listening, we've got various ideas in terms of who we're going to try and target for interviews. Our plan is to do these fortnightly, and I think the plan is to release them on a sort of Thursday, late in a Thursday, fortnightly. We are interested, if people have got, questions or topics or things they'd like us to cover, let us know. If we can do it, we'll try and fit it in. The plan at the moment is really to do sort of interviews, try and get experts in the field, but we're quite happy also doing sort of a Q&A type session. If people have got particular niggles or worries about, I know there's a lot of misinformation about what happens to waste and where it goes and why things happen, and we're quite happy to try and answer these questions. And 9 times out of 10 if we can't answer, then we'll know somebody that can answer, and that'll probably lead us on to other podcast interviews.
Absolutely. Yep, that's the plan anyway. So from us, we would say thanks everyone for listening. We will be fortnightly episodes. This one will be released beginning of January, 5th of January 2023, and then fortnightly thereafter. So you can subscribe, keep an eye out on the Rubbish Talk podcast, and in the episode notes we'll have some contact information to send queries, questions, topic ideas, anything you want to know. You can get in touch with one of the team, and hopefully we'll answer your questions along the way. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks again, Alasdair, and you'll hear from us both very soon.
Thank you.